Ready to transform your marriage in less than a week? Join the free 6-day Intimacy Breakthrough Challenge and discover how small daily actions create extraordinary connection with your spouse. Start today at oneextraordinarymarriage.com/6days. That's oneextraordinarymarriage.com/6days.
From Naples, Florida, this is the One Extraordinary Marriage Show, where being busy is overdone, romancing is fun, and scheduling sex is taking the guesswork out of wondering when you're going to get some. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. From coast to coast and around the world, thank you for joining us. It's time to talk sex, love, and commitment. Give us a call or text us on the Hug Hotline at 858-876-5663. Or send us an email to hugs@oneextraordinarymarriage.com. In today's episode, we're talking about how little actions done consistently over time can create big changes in your marriage.
And there's a quote from Vincent Van Gogh that says, "Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together. And great things are not accidental, but must certainly be willed." And I think as we talk about change in marriage, so much is wrapped up in that quote from Van Gogh. But first, as we prepare to start into today's show, we always start with a hug. And a hug is really an opportunity for us to celebrate what you're doing in your marriage, the breakthroughs that you're having. And this hug comes from an Instagram DM that we received when someone saw that we were headed to Omaha a couple weeks ago for the Strong Marriages Conference. And it said, "I have been meaning to message you for a long time to let you know that all turned out very well from the many months of coaching I had with you. I have been very happily married these past 4 years or so, and so much of that is the result of your advice in keeping me steadily focused on steps to improve the situation versus just being a sounding board for venting. I truly don't know if the outcome would have been the same without your coaching."
Wow.
That's
powerful. I love it.
And this is something truly I hadn't heard from her in a few years. And you know, I know, we know here at One Extraordinary Marriage that when you reach out for help, we're just a small part of the solution, because this gal had to do the work, right? Coaching, being part of Intimacy Mastery, reading the 6 pillars of intimacy. None of those things matter if you aren't taking action on the other side. And so just super honored to be hearing 4 years later just what has happened in that marriage. And, you know, I mentioned that hug came in as we were flying into Omaha for the Strong Marriages Conference at Love Church. And over the past 2 weekends, we've been there. We were also at Life Family Church in Austin. And we've had this privilege of sharing around 6 pillars and just seeing couples get a hold of the framework for their marriage.
And for the first time, which has been amazing to see. At Love Church in particular, when we asked how many of those attending the Strong Marriages Conference had heard of One Extraordinary Marriage, had heard of Elisa and I, either through social, the podcast, wherever, maybe getting the newsletter, it was only about maybe 10%, 20% of the room. And so when you see such a large group of folks being exposed, which you guys have been exposed for years now to the 6 pillars of intimacy, but to see them get exposed for the first time and come up and be like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. It's really just such a wonderful place to be. And really, I bring that up to say thank you to the One Family, because if it wasn't for you, the work that we have put in for the last 15 years wouldn't be impacting those couples today. So thank you.
And we know, I mean, we're so honored every time that we're invited in and have an opportunity to connect, whether it's with the pastors of the church or the community. It's an honor and a privilege. And, you know, inevitably over the course of the time that we're on location, whether it's during couple time, table talk, you know, whatever the different churches refer to it as, or when we're signing books, things like that, we will hear comments like, "I have so many pillars to work on," or "we have so much that we need to address," or "oh my gosh, like how do we make all of these changes?" And we hear it, you know, and it could have easily have been Tony and I, you know, back in 2008, essentially making those same comments. And so often we just lovingly look at the individual and, you know, encourage them to take a deep breath and say, you know what, we're so proud of you for being aware of this, but don't let it overwhelm you. What is one small step that you can take for your marriage? What's one pillar of intimacy that you can start with, right? Because if you think about all 6 and you're like, oh my gosh, we have cracks everywhere. And literally I was just having a coaching conversation yesterday, and the husband referred to just everything that's going on in their marriage. And he said, it's like, Alisa, it's like that we've got 50 gunshot wounds. And I'm like, no. Let's just triage. What is the first thing that we can focus on? It's the same reason that in Intimacy Mastery, we're not giving you a roadmap on how to take action in all 6 pillars. We're starting with the pillar that's the weakest in your marriage, right? Because if you try and do everything at once, overwhelm actually sets you up for failure. You don't make change when you feel overwhelmed. You don't take the small steps, the little actions consistently when you feel overwhelmed. You throw up your hands and you're like, this is too much. I can't do this. I'm not, and we're just going to stay here. Stuck, uncomfortable, disconnected, miserable, not loving each other, contemplating divorce. I mean, the list could go on and on. But here's the thing. It's not that everybody has the same little action. It's determining what's the best little action for your marriage, right? And Tony and I, I was prepping for this episode, and I'm like, I told him yesterday as I was prepping for this, and I'm like, okay, so I know what my little action is. Do you have a little action? Because my little action, and
hold on, I don't think you gave the whole context. What is the little action that you've taken over the last 6 months, a year, that you have felt has made a difference in how we engage in our marriage?
Perfect. I appreciate the context. So for me, it's well documented in this podcast and in our marriage that during conflict, I had a habit of completely shutting down. I would not make eye contact with Tony. I would stop engaging. It was just like literally check out. I'm literally just a shell of a human being sitting on the couch or in the car.
And when she is saying that was very prominent early on in our marriage, like very prominent. Over the years, that has decreased, but it has not gone away completely. We are humans. We are living life. We are folks that are still growing and being intentional and taking action. And so over even the last 15 years of the One Extraordinary Marriage show and what we've been doing, there have been times when Alisa and I have gone into arguments. We do argue. We do have our moments. We are living life just like you, where she would shut down. She would disengage. She would turn her head. She would walk out of the room. She would just go quiet. I mean, so like when she's talking about this isn't something like, oh, well, this happened when, we were, 2 years into our marriage or 5 years into our marriage and that was it. It's like, no, this is part of what has happened over time.
28 years to be exact of marriage. And so sometime last year, it might have been even after we had the whole apathy conversation.
Beginning of the year.
At the beginning of the year last year, leaving that trip in Vegas. I made this conscious decision. I did not tell Tony, but I made this decision that when we were in conflict, instead of looking down, I was just going to maintain eye contact with this guy. Like I was going to stay in there. And I'm just like, you're just going to look at him. Right? Like it's just going to be a thing. Like you are not putting your eyes down. And I can honestly tell you that in the last year, I'll be interested actually to hear what you have to say. I feel like I've been more engaged. I am very aware that there have been 2 instances in that 12-month period where I was just so overwhelmed. So everything that I know that I didn't, because it was just too much. And one of them was right after we moved here, which I think was just a big part of the move and stress and everything else.
And here's the thing, Alisa is saying that. I have no recollection of those 2. I'm just being truthful and honest.
Wow.
No recollection of them. They honestly, if Alisa didn't mention it to me right now, I wouldn't have any clue.
So do you feel like, have you noticed a difference in engagement?
I have, though. This is the thing that I was going to say, though. Because Alisa, for the most part, unbeknownst to me, when we have had arguments, I feel like our arguments have diminished. We don't have, they just sort of all right, cool, because you are making eye contact. We are engaging. And I feel like the arguments themselves pretty much peter out. They don't reach an escalation point at all, because that engagement allows us to just go, okay, and we've learned, like, again, look at that conflict cycle. We break the conflict because instead of you disengaging, you're staying in, which allows me to get more information from you to understand where you're thinking and where you're at, instead of the disengagement, which frustrates me because then I don't know what you're thinking. And so for me, I feel like, and I don't know what the argument was when we moved here to Naples, but I feel like since we've moved to Naples, now there was a lot that went on with our move and everything, but I feel like overall, like, I feel like we haven't had many of arguments. And when we have, again, I've noticed the engagement side of it. So it just sort of diminishes the frustration on my side. It's just sort of like, okay, like, we're going to at least finish this conversation and we're going to be able to, like, be adults about it, say our parts, and come up with some sort of solution to move forward. Now, we may not always end it exactly the way I want it to or you want it to. And yet that's part of marriage and compromising and being willing to go, okay, I'm willing to step back and go, you're more passionate about this than I am. So I will concede to what you want right now. But I also know in some of those moments, you've also had to concede to what I really felt passionate about.
That's awesome. What have you done?
Over this last year, what have I done? I feel like mine is so lackluster compared to yours.
Well, so let me just let me actually just say something.
Know,
the coach in me can't let you get away with that.
I said it. And
sorry, guys. I don't often coach Tony, but the comparison thing and saying, like, mine feels lackluster. Like, if it's making a difference in your marriage, it's not lackluster. And
this is true.
There are no small actions. They're just the actions you don't take.
Correct.
So if you're taking action, we're proud of you. Don't judge them against anybody else's. Don't judge them against ours. Don't look for the same kind of impact. So I love you.
Yes.
Thank you for letting me coach you for a hot second.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you. All right. So for mine, it's not lackluster compared to Elisa's. For the last year, as many of you know, I write my belief statements. And I do think this has made a huge difference, the belief statements themselves. But the part that I want to share here today is I do something at the end of that is my best things. And I have two of them. One's personal and one is business. And I think writing out something personal at the end of every day, many of it does lead towards Elisa. I think it just makes it's that little action that I praise, that I'm grateful for, that I see it every day. And I will say there are some days where I'm like, did anything really happen in my personal life today? Like, I feel like a lot of what I'm in or what I'm doing with Elisa or the people I'm talking to sometimes just tends to always be around One Extraordinary Marriage. And there's a very fine line between that being personal and business. And so I am trying to find those nuggets of what's been really good in my personal life. And a lot of times it will lead to, just the other night I was like, sexy time with Elisa. That's what I call when we're making love or we have a great, but it just goes like, wow, like today was sort of a lackluster day. I don't know why I keep using that word today, but in a personal sense, like I went through most of my day, like just from the time I got up to the time I went to bed, thinking about One Extraordinary Marriage, the one family, how are we impacting marriages, my children for some parts of it. And then at the end of the day, Elisa and I find some time for ourselves. And the best thing I can write is like, I had sexy time with my beautiful wife, Elisa. And that, to me, just sets the tone for, hey, that was a pretty awesome day.
Well, and I think what I've noticed, and this does, so much of this ties into our emotional intimacy, but when I'm working on staying engaged with you through my little actions and you're working on, whether you verbalize it or not, expressing that gratitude, your best of what was the best thing that happened today, you have those two things happening. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not even something we're like discussing, like, oh, you need to tell me what your best thing is, or
no,
oh, you need to engage with me, or you're not engaged. It's just like, these are the actions. And we've been doing this consistently over, for me, I know it's been the last year. I don't know when you started writing your best statements in addition to your affirmations.
I think it was sometimes the year prior. So probably like 23.
2 years.
So probably going on somewhere year and a half, 2 years at this point in time. But I want to just say something real quick, because we want to get to these responses that we got from you guys, from our poll on Instagram stories. What we're talking about here today, what's the little actions that you can take?
Right, because it's like in the 6 Pillars of Intimacy book, I use this term called baby steps. And so the question was, what are the little actions or baby steps you're doing this month? And baby steps are just those tiny little things. Like, babies are not born walking and running. They have to learn how to do all the reps before they can get there. And so when we asked this question, and I want you to hear these responses, there were things like, fill a mason jar with little notes about the reasons I love my wife for her to pick from daily. Be more kind and less sarcastic. Reinstate our coffee talks. Remembering gratitude and admiration. Show more physical attention. Reset the coffee station before bed so it's one less thing for the hubs in the morning. Read Money for Couples and meet every week to implement each chapter. Pray for my spouse daily. Pray together every night before going to bed. Watch a movie together late at night after the kids are in bed. Play cards together more often. Initiate more. Split the week in half so we each get a chance to initiate. And what struck me, like, I'm reading through these responses, and there were so many more. This just kind of like summarizes them all together. But I didn't specifically say anything about the 6 pillars. I didn't list them out and say, think through emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, recreational, and sexual. But the list, the answers that we got back covered all 6 pillars. And what I love about that is that it highlights the fact that where your marriage needs attention, with the little actions that you can take, aren't necessarily going to be what another couple is starting with, right? Or what they're doing this month. And that's the beauty of the 6 pillars, is that everyone can take action in the area that matters to them. But it's thinking through, what are those actions and how do I implement? And we're going to talk about that after this break. With us brand new to Southwest Florida, trying to figure out what our next home is going to be is so much easier with Redfin. Whether you're looking to buy or rent your next place, you need the Redfin app. Redfin makes it fun to search all the homes and apartments in your neighborhood. We've been able to look at so many different homes in the area, really getting a feel for what's here and what we like. It's been fun to search and ask the questions, where do we want to live? What are homes like here? What amenities do we really want? And if you find a place you love, Redfin makes it easy to go see it in person. Just schedule the tour right from the app. Plus, if you're looking to sell, Redfin agents know how to get you the best price possible for your home. That's because they close twice as many deals as other agents. And with a listing fee as low as 1%, Redfin's fees are half of what others often charge, which means you'll have more money to put towards your next home. So whether you're looking to buy, rent, or sell, Redfin's got you covered. Download the Redfin app to get started.
From ADT comes Trusted Neighbor, the new standard in home access. Through the ADT Plus app, easily grant and automate event-based or scheduled access for neighbors, friends, and helpers. Notify trusted individuals of events like alarms or packages, and set access windows for planned guests or even the dog walker without interrupting your day. Visit ADT.com. When every second counts, count on ADT. Requires ADT Complete Pro monitoring plan and compatible devices. Copyright 2025 ADT LLC. All rights reserved.
So we're back, and we're wrapping this whole episode around this idea that little actions done consistently over time create big change in your marriage. And I think about this a lot with my coaching clients, because the reality is, I am not a runner. Let me just state that very clearly before I give you this analogy. I'm not a runner.
Although you did your 5K.
I have done a few 5Ks, but like marathoners, I have mad respect for you.
Yes, I do too.
And there's something when you watch a marathoner come across the finish line and you just know the amount of effort that's gone into 26.2 miles. But it's not just those 26.2 miles. It's all of the training steps. It's all of the training miles. It's how many pairs of shoes they've gone through and things like that. And that's the little steps to get the big action of crossing the finish line. right? To get the big action of completion. And that's why we talk in terms of little steps in each one of the 6 pillars. It's thinking through, like, if it's emotional intimacy, could you do something like creating this time and space to have, and I just say this with a lot of my coaching couples, right? Like, what's that transition time? Right, where the two of you are just kind of checking in with your hearts. It's not just business as usual, but it's this heart checkpoint where you sit in this moment and just say, hey, I want to hear what's on your heart, right? And thinking through, like, do I create space for my, like Tony and I, we were getting ready to start this episode, and he said something to me and I said something back, and I'm like, what? And I didn't create space in that moment for him to actually share what his thought was. I jumped to my own conclusion and shut it down, not fostering that emotional intimacy. And so some of us just need to actually, like, the little action might be not interrupting our spouse this week and just letting them finish a thought, or not talking over them, but allowing them that space to go, I just want to hear what you have to say.
And that's a learned skill. If you listen to a lot of the early episodes, and I've shared this before, I didn't like when Elisa would disagree with me, so it was much easier for me to just talk over her and shut her down. And so over the years, I've had to learn to, even here on the podcast. And that's where I've learned to, okay, if she's saying something, then I get away from the microphone. It doesn't change. I need to still be in that space. Does it still sometimes happen that we talk over each other? Absolutely. We're not perfect. We're a work in progress. But I've learned over the 15 years that that's a skill you can absolutely learn.
When it comes to your physical intimacy, y'all know that kissing is not my forte, if you've listened for a while. But one of the ideas, and we've done this from time to time, where it's like you go back to that, like, 6-second kiss, and you might have to tick the seconds in your head.
I will say, though,
what are you
when we are sexually intimate,
yes,
you are getting a lot more kissy.
Wow.
You have been. I find it very interesting. Like, we have been very much more, and you are in that moment. I would love for us to be able to kiss just around the house for sure, for 6 seconds as well. But I will say, during the sexual intimacy side of things, you have become much more
kissy.
You have.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I just highlight the fact that we're 28 years into this journey, and he's saying that now? It is actually another area that I have been aware of. Not as much as, like, the eye contact thing during conflict, but being more intentional about kissing. Because and that's why, like, some of these things, guys, that we share, these little actions, because these are things that we're, like, looking at as well, right? We don't ever, like, we've told the audiences the last couple of weekends, we don't ever get on a stage and act like we are perfect and we don't have anything that we're working on, that we've got it all together and we are just, like, Instagram pretty 24/7, 365, because we are not.
No.
Right? When it comes to your financial intimacy, what does it look like for you to maybe have a 15-minute money meeting once a week, just so that you're staying on track, so that you can actually share your financial wins? What if we actually got to a place where couples were sharing their financial wins for the week, about how they, maybe saved money or canceled an account, or, were able to, make their money work for them, instead of dreading those money meetings, but getting into this place of saying, hey, how are we going to develop this closeness around our finances, so that people aren't like, oh my gosh, we have to talk about money. Oh, I hate this. But instead, just like, hey, we're on the same page. We're like, we finalized the estate documents this week, or we got, the insurance set up for the next year, whatever it might be, but we're celebrating our wins in addition to having the conversation about the cash flow and that type of thing. When it comes to your spiritual intimacy.
And can I hold on, I just want to say one thing about financial intimacy too.
Yeah.
Just because we're in this stage of life, and many of you might be there as well, or planning, when you begin to have children going into college, leaving the home, maybe going to trade schools, things of that nature, I will say it gets a bit much, because a lot is moving. I'm going to say it because it frustrates me to no end. I believe universities and colleges are way overpriced at this point in time. They have absolutely outpaced anything that any of us have made over the last 30 years, especially those of us who went to school in the 90s. So there are those tensions that you need to be addressing. And what's a small little step? For some of you who are younger, you may want to start looking at 529s. I have great friends, cousins and all that just started putting away, and it's made a big difference for Elisa and I. We didn't do as much as we should have, and so we've had to have some tough conversations around this with both of our children in college. What are we doing? So this 15-minute money meeting can be a huge help. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not 15 minutes. Maybe you guys get to a point where it's 10. Whatever it is, you may need to take that small step and that little action to make some big changes. Absolutely.
So moving on to spiritual intimacy, what's the consistent little action that you can do in your prayer life? Are you praying with your spouse every day? Are you praying for your spouse every day? What would shift if you just made a concerted effort to say, you know what, I'm just going to pray for my spouse how would your heart posture towards them change if you were not praying? Please hear me. I'm not saying pray about your spouse. Pray for them. Praying about says, God, will you change? God, you need to change this other person. Praying for says, God, I know what they're going through. I'm praying on their behalf. There's a completely different result in terms of how you view your spouse, the questions that you're asking, how you're connecting with them when you are praying for your spouse.
You're interceding for them in their time, in the place that they're having struggle.
Absolutely. When it comes to your recreational intimacy, any of you that have coached with me know that when I start talking about like dates and that type of thing, I'm like, let's start making ideas. Mm-hmm. Can we please, like any of our audiences know that we talk about the fact that it's like you can easily get into a car on date night and get so frustrated with each other because nobody's got a plan on what you want to do.
You play the what do you want to do game.
Absolutely. So why not instead take 5 or 10 minutes to write down ideas? Like some people even call it like a joy jar or a date jar or that type of thing. And you put activities in the jar and then you pick one out when it's daytime. And you're just like, this is what we're going to do because we've already like decided and we've looked at it and we've created these ideas and that type of thing. And we're just going to go do. We're not going to argue about it. We're not going to say, I don't want to. We're just going to go do and have fun together. We as married couples, we need to be the ones having all the fun, people. Singlehood should not look like the most fun thing on the planet. Marriage should look like the most fun thing on the planet when it comes to relationships.
And when we talk about this one, little actions, it doesn't have to be the extravagant dinner. Mm-hmm. It could be the smallest thing. And for Elisa and I still love it. She'll pull out the Monopoly deal cards. Just be like, hey, let's play some games. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, like let's get off the computer. Mm-hmm. Let's stop everything else and let's just focus in on each other for 15 minutes and just have some fun together and enjoy each other's company.
Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to sexual intimacy, I actually want to just take a different approach when it comes to sexual intimacy, because so often we talk about romance, initiating, and foreplay, but a big part of what's underneath that is how a person feels desired.
Okay.
Or how you're expressing desire. And, just cultivating some ideas around this, came up with this idea of like, what would it look like if you had a desire journal where you would write down what made you feel desired this week or how you want to feel desired? Because sometimes that can be a really hard conversation to verbalize, but getting into this place of, oh, when you did this, I felt so desired, right? If you like having, the hand on your bottom and he walks by and he just does that little love tap on your bottom and you're like, oh, maybe I haven't told him lately that makes me feel desired. Or when it's, you sit next to me on the couch instead of sitting on an opposite couch, that just makes me feel like you want to be close to me and it makes me feel connected to you. That can lead to the sexual intimacy, but it's bringing that together and actually exchanging these ideas. Because one of the things we hear from so many couples is, I don't know how to talk about sexual intimacy. I don't know how to share these things with my spouse. And yet when we take the time to just write it down, and it's just a journal that goes back and forth between husband and wife, what gets fostered in that connection that you can see the words, you understand what makes your spouse feel desired, and then you can move into this place of expressing that, leading to greater sexual intimacy.
I like that. And it really, even as you bring it up for the one family, it's forcing me to even look at this and go, what would I say? Because I don't have anything to say there right now. And I think it's because I haven't necessarily taken that time to go write down one thing that made you feel desired this week. Because that's a tough I find that sometimes to be tough. And, to just take a moment to go, all right, what made me feel desired? Actually, you know what? I think what made me feel desired this week, actually, we started something new and I love it. It's called the color game.
I was going to say, if you're really having this episode and you're saying this right now and you can't think of one thing.
No. But this is brand new.
This is brand new.
This is brand new. So in Elisa made me feel desired. Right? Yeah.
Yes, I made you feel desired.
You made me feel desired. So I was like, hey, Elise, let's play like the color panty game. And the whole purpose of it was like, I just pick a color and she comes out in that color. Because she has colors, I don't know, like, and so I'm just like guessing, and but I was just like turquoise, and she came out in this amazing pair that I love, but she doesn't wear it a lot now because it's lacy and whatever. But I felt desired by her just doing that.
Right.
So it was just like that was it's a 2 thumbs up for Tony. And definitely something we are going to do more of because I just love it because then we did it again the next night.
You can't even talk, you guys.
I know. I just got so excited. And I was like, yeah, put on something like red or pink. And she came out in something that I had bought her like years ago, I think, at this point in time. And literally my jaw dropped. I was like, and she just started laughing because she's like, your face. And I'm like, where did that come from? I don't even remember. Like, you may have worn it once when I first bought it, and I've never seen it since. So, that would be for me.
And I think the other thing too, and just in closing this on sexual intimacy, there are a lot of couples where the expression of desire becomes almost like a tug of war. It becomes a challenge on how do I express it? How do you feel desired? What are you doing to make me feel desired? This type of thing. And when you start something like a desire journal, when you start this exchange of ideas, it actually brings it to the forefront. And what we give attention to grows. It doesn't matter if we're talking about like giving attention to our money and it grows. It doesn't matter if we talk about giving attention to our conversations and they grow. If we give attention to our desire between husband and wife, what happens if it's something that's on the forefront of your mind? How do you show up in your actions? How do you interact with one another? What do you do for your spouse, right? So this isn't just like, oh, okay, well, that's like another thing that Lisa wants us to do. No, it's coming back to this place. And it doesn't matter which pillar of intimacy that we're talking about. One of the things we talk about a lot in Intimacy Mastery is don't try and tackle them all at once, right? Pick the one pillar. Pick one action, pick one little action, and get consistent over this next week, over this next month to see the changes that start to create the next level of your extraordinary marriage.
Yeah, and if you'd like to join us in Intimacy Mastery and transform your marriage from one that is emotionally distant and sexually frustrated to one of deep connection and passion, we'd love for you to join us. Go to intimacymastery.com. Come join us and many others in the One Family. As we step into this week, you guys, and you're looking at like, okay, what's the little changes that I can make? This is your challenge this week, is pick one thing. It's not picking 6. It's not picking 3. What's one little change you can make, and you can do it consistently over time? Because that's where things begin to change and you get to have big changes. You may want to tell your spouse about it. You may not. That's up to you. The big thing is, are you going to be intentional and are you going to take action to see it through? So go do it this week. We love you guys. Have a great week and we'll catch you next week. Love you guys. Thank you for listening to the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. If you love this podcast, please leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Your review helps others find the show and know that it's the right fit for them and their marriage.